Moxley destroys Don Callis' AEW script finally. After months of manipulation, scheming, and hiding behind his hired guns, Don Callis got exactly what he deserved. Jon Moxley put his hands on the invisible hand, and what we witnessed wasn't just a beatdown, it was justice served with extreme prejudice. But here's what has me absolutely furious: it took this long for Moxley to get his hands on Callis. Months of watching this smug manipulator pull strings, orchestrate attacks, and run away like a coward every single time. And now that it finally happened, now that we finally got the payoff we've been waiting for, I need to break down exactly why this moment was years in the making and why the wrestling world is exploding right now. Before I dissect every brutal second of this destruction, tell me, did Don Callis get off too easy, or did Moxley give him exactly what he deserved? Drop your answer below because the AEW fanbase is split on this. What happened at AEW wasn't just another segment. It wasn't just another beatdown. It was the culmination of one of the most intense storylines in modern wrestling. Jon Moxley, the Death Rider, the unhinged warrior who's been circling Don Callis like a shark smelling blood, finally got his moment of vengeance. And when I say he destroyed Callis, I mean he left nothing left. Let me paint the picture for those who somehow missed this carnage. Don Callis was in the ring or backstage, probably doing what he does best, talking, running his mouth, manipulating the situation, thinking he was safe because his muscle was around to protect him. Kenny Omega, or Will Ospreay, or whoever Callis has in his stable this week was supposed to be his insurance policy. But Moxley doesn't care about insurance policies. Moxley doesn't care about backup plans. When Moxley wants someone, he goes through whoever's in his way to get them. And that's exactly what happened. Moxley came out of nowhere. Maybe he ambushed Callis backstage. Maybe he jumped him in the ring. Maybe he waited until the perfect moment when Callis's protection was distracted. However it happened, Moxley got his hands on the invisible hand, and what followed was brutal. Punches, elbows, stomps, everything in Moxley's arsenal was unleashed on Callis. This wasn't a wrestling match, this was a mugging. This was personal. This was Moxley exercising months of frustration and rage on the man who's been orchestrating chaos in AEW. The crowd was losing their minds, because everyone's been waiting for this moment. Everyone wanted to see Don Callis get his comeuppance. Everyone wanted to see Moxley deliver the beating that Callis has had coming for years. Have you ever heard a crowd reaction louder than when Moxley finally got his hands on Callis? Tell me what you remember. Now let's talk about why this moment is so significant, because the history between Moxley and Callis runs deep. This isn't just a random feud, this is personal on multiple levels. Don Callis has been a thorn in Moxley's side for years. Going back to his association with Kenny Omega, Callis has been involved in storylines that have directly affected Moxley's career. The Impact Wrestling crossover, the AEW World Championship picture, the manipulation of talent, all of it has intersected with Moxley's path. But it's more than just storyline history. There's a philosophical difference between these two men that makes this feud so compelling. Moxley represents pure, unfiltered violence and authenticity. He's the anti-establishment warrior who does things his way and doesn't play political games. Callis represents manipulation, strategy, and using others to do his dirty work. He's the ultimate manager/manipulator who hides behind his clients while orchestrating everything from the shadows. He's the corporate shark in a world of fighters. These two approaches were destined to collide. And when they finally did, when Moxley finally got through all the barriers and protection Callis had built around himself, it was explosive. But here's what has me angry about this whole situation: why did it take so long? For months we've watched Callis run away. For months we've seen him hide behind Kenny, or Will Ospreay, or whoever else. For months we've been begging for Moxley to finally catch this slippery weasel and deliver justice. AEW kept teasing it. They kept building anticipation. They kept showing us close calls where Moxley almost got Callis but didn't quite reach him. And while I understand that's good storytelling, that's building anticipation for the payoff, it was also frustrating as hell. Do you think AEW waited too long to give us this moment? Or was the wait worth it? Let me know. Let's break down the brutality of what Moxley did to Callis, because every move, every strike, every moment was deliberate and vicious. Moxley is known for his unhinged style. He's not a pretty wrestler. He's not doing gymnastics and showcasing athleticism. Moxley's style is violent. It's gritty. It's designed to hurt people and make them suffer. And that's exactly what he brought to his encounter with Callis. If Moxley hit Callis with the paradigm shift, his signature DDT, that would have been brutal on its own. Spiking a 62-year-old man who's not a trained wrestler directly on his head? That's intense. That's the kind of move that makes people question if they went too far. If Moxley locked in his submission holds, if he applied a chokehold or a crossface, watching Callis tap out or pass out would have been satisfying in a way that's hard to describe. After all the manipulation, seeing the puppet master helpless and at the mercy of someone he can't talk his way out of? That's poetic. If Moxley used weapons, which let's be honest he probably did because that's his MO, then we're talking about even more brutality. Steel chairs, kendo sticks, whatever was available. Moxley turning Callis into a human piñata would have been exactly what the fans wanted to see. The key to this attack working is that it needs to feel real. It can't be a worked wrestling match. It needs to be a beating. It needs to be uncomfortable to watch. It needs to make you question if they should stop it. That's how you know it worked. And from what we're hearing, from the reactions online, from the way people are describing it, that's exactly what happened. Moxley didn't just beat up Callis, he destroyed him. He left him broken, bloody, and utterly defeated. What's the most brutal thing you've seen Moxley do in his career? Compare it to this. Here's where things get controversial, and I need to address this head-on because people are already debating it online. Did AEW go too far with the violence? Don Callis is 62 years old. He's not a wrestler. He's a manager and personality. Having him take a brutal beating from someone like Moxley, someone who works stiff and doesn't pull punches, that's risky from both a safety and optics perspective. Some fans are saying it was too much. They're concerned about Callis's safety. They're questioning whether AEW should be portraying this level of violence against a non-wrestler. They're worried about how it looks to mainstream audiences and potential sponsors. But here's the counterargument, and this is where I land on this issue. Don Callis has been a heel for months. He's been orchestrating attacks. He's been manipulating people. He's been the villain of this story. And in wrestling, villains need to get their comeuppance. If Callis can dish it out, if he can order attacks and manipulate situations that result in violence against others, then he needs to be able to take it when the consequences come calling. You can't play the heel manager who orchestrates chaos and then cry foul when someone finally gets their hands on you. Wrestling needs these moments. We need the payoff where the villain gets what's coming to them. Without that satisfaction, without that justice, storylines feel hollow and incomplete. The fans need to see the bad guy punished. That said, there's a line between satisfying payoff and uncomfortable violence. AEW needs to be careful not to cross into territory that makes people genuinely concerned rather than entertained. It's a delicate balance. From what we're seeing, it seems like they walked that line pretty well. People are excited about this moment. They're celebrating it. They're not genuinely concerned for Callis's well-being, they're enjoying the storyline payoff. Did AEW go too far, or was this exactly what the story needed? Give me your take. Let's talk about what this means for the Don Callis family storyline, because this is obviously a major development in that ongoing saga. The Don Callis family has been one of AEW's most prominent heel factions. With Callis at the helm managing talents like Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, Kyle Fletcher, and others, they've been a dominant force wreaking havoc across AEW programming. Moxley destroying Callis sends a message to the entire faction. It says that Callis isn't untouchable. It says that his manipulation and schemes have consequences. It says that Moxley is coming for all of them. This should trigger a response from the Don Callis family. Kenny Omega should be furious. Will Ospreay should be out for blood. The entire faction should be unified in their desire for revenge against Moxley. That sets up a potential war between Moxley and his allies against the Don Callis family. That's months of compelling television. That's multiple matches, multiple angles, multiple opportunities for amazing storytelling. But here's my concern: will AEW actually follow through? Or will this be another instance of a big moment that doesn't lead anywhere significant? AEW has been guilty in the past of creating massive moments and then not capitalizing on them. They create incredible segments and then the storyline just fizzles out. The follow-up doesn't match the initial impact. I'm begging AEW to not let that happen here. This Moxley Callis moment is too good, too intense, too important to not follow through on properly. Give us the war. Give us the revenge. Give us the story. What should happen next with the Don Callis family after this attack? Fantasy book it for me. Now let's discuss Jon Moxley's character and why moments like this are so important for him. Moxley's entire persona is built on being unpredictable, violent, and unwilling to play by the rules. He's the ultimate anti-hero who does terrible things to bad people. For that character to work, he needs to actually deliver on the violence and chaos. He can't just talk about being dangerous, he needs to show it. He can't just threaten people, he needs to follow through. This attack on Callis is perfectly in character for Moxley. It's exactly what we'd expect from him. It reinforces everything we know about his character and reminds us why he's one of the most compelling figures in wrestling. But it also raises questions about Moxley's own moral compass. Is he a hero for delivering justice to a villain? Or is he becoming a villain himself through his excessive violence? That moral ambiguity is what makes Moxley such a fascinating character. AEW has been playing with this idea a lot recently. Moxley isn't a traditional babyface. He's not kissing babies and smiling for the camera. He's doing horrible things, but he's doing them to people who arguably deserve it. That's complex storytelling. That's wrestling for adults who can handle moral ambiguity. That's what separates AEW from more family-friendly wrestling products. Do you consider Jon Moxley a hero or a villain at this point? Tell me where you stand. Let me address something that's going to make some WWE fans angry, but needs to be said. Could you imagine WWE doing something like this? Could you imagine them letting someone like Dean Ambrose, Moxley's WWE name, brutally destroy a manager on television? No way. WWE would sanitize it. They'd make it safe. They'd cut away or have security break it up immediately. They wouldn't let it be truly brutal and uncomfortable. That's the difference between AEW and WWE. AEW is willing to go to places that WWE won't. They're willing to be edgier, more violent, more real. They're capturing that feeling of late 90s/early 2000s wrestling that made people uncomfortable but also utterly captivating. Now, WWE fans will argue that there's a reason WWE doesn't do this stuff. They'll say it's irresponsible, that it's not necessary, that you can tell compelling stories without excessive violence. And they're not entirely wrong. But AEW fans will counter that wrestling needs this edge. It needs to feel dangerous and unpredictable. It needs moments that make you say, holy sh*t, I can't believe they just did that. Those are the moments that create buzz and get people talking. This is one of the fundamental differences between the two companies, and it's why there's such a divide in wrestling fandom. Some people prefer WWE's more controlled product, others prefer AEW's Wild West anything can happen vibe. Neither is objectively right or wrong. They're just different approaches catering to different audiences. But moments like Moxley destroying Callis are exactly why some fans prefer AEW. Which company's approach do you prefer, WWE's controlled product or AEW's edgier style? Be honest. Let's talk about the crowd reaction, because that's always a huge indicator of whether a moment worked or not. And from everything we're hearing, the crowd was nuclear for this. There's something special about a crowd that's been waiting for a moment for months finally getting it. The anticipation builds and builds, and when the payoff finally comes, the reaction is explosive. I imagine the second Moxley got his hands on Callis, the building erupted. People jumping to their feet, screaming, chanting, losing their absolute minds because they're finally seeing what they've been begging for. And as Moxley delivered each strike, each move, each moment of violence, the crowd would have been eating it up. Chanting yes. Chanting F***ck him up Moxley. Chanting whatever expresses their absolute joy at seeing Don Callis get destroyed. That crowd energy is what makes wrestling magic. It's the symbiotic relationship between the performers and the audience. When everyone's on the same page, when everyone wants the same thing and it's happening right in front of them, that's when wrestling transcends being just a show and becomes an experience. AEW crowds are generally hot, but this moment would have been on another level. This would have been one of those reactions that gives you chills when you watch it back. One of those moments where the crowd becomes part of the story. What's the loudest crowd reaction you've personally witnessed at a wrestling show? Compare it to this. Here's something interesting to consider. How does this moment compare to other famous manager beatdowns in wrestling history? Because there have been some legendary ones. Stone Cold beating up Vince McMahon repeatedly throughout the Attitude Era. Those segments were some of the highest-rated moments in wrestling history. Fans loved seeing the evil boss get his comeuppance from the anti-hero. CM Punk attacking Paul Heyman and putting him through a table. That was personal, it was brutal, and it was the payoff to months of storytelling. Daniel Bryan's attacks on the authority figures. Randy Orton punting various managers and authority figures. There's a long history of wrestlers destroying the people who've been making their lives miserable. The Moxley Callis moment fits right into that tradition. It's the classic story of the manipulator finally getting what's coming to them. It's satisfying on a primal level because we've all wanted to see the villain punished. But what makes this moment special is the build-up and the characters involved. Moxley is one of the most intense performers in wrestling today. Callis is one of the best heel managers in the business. The chemistry between them, the history, the hatred, it all combined to create something memorable. Where does this rank among the greatest manager beatdowns ever? Top 5? Top 10? Give me your ranking. Let's discuss what this means for AEW's ratings and business. Because moments like this are what draw attention, create buzz, and get people talking about your product. In today's fractured media landscape, it's hard to create water cooler moments. It's hard to get people talking about your show on social media. It's hard to cut through the noise and make people pay attention. But this Moxley Callis moment? This is doing exactly that. Twitter is blowing up. Reddit is going crazy. YouTube is being flooded with clips and reactions. Everyone in wrestling is talking about this. That kind of organic buzz is invaluable for AEW. It's free advertising. It's word of mouth that brings in new viewers. It's the kind of thing that makes lapsed fans check out the product again. AEW needs these moments to compete with WWE's massive machine. They need to create content that feels different and exciting. They need to give people a reason to watch their show instead of the competition. And based on the reaction, this moment is doing exactly that. People who might not regularly watch AEW are seeking out clips. People are talking about tuning in next week to see the fallout. That's how you grow your audience. The question is, can AEW capitalize on this momentum? Can they turn this viral moment into sustained viewership? Can they follow through with storylines that keep people invested? That's the challenge. Creating a moment is one thing, building on it consistently is another. AEW needs to stick the landing. Do moments like this make you more likely to watch AEW regularly? Tell me if this converted you. Here's a controversial take: maybe Don Callis wanted this to happen. Maybe getting destroyed by Moxley serves his character and his storylines in the long run. Think about it. Callis is a heel manager. His job is to generate heat for his clients. What generates more heat than being the sympathetic victim of a brutal attack? What makes his stable more justified in their revenge than watching their leader get destroyed? Callis lying broken and beaten creates sympathy, in a heel way, for the Don Callis family. It gives Kenny and Ospreay and everyone else a reason to go after Moxley with extreme prejudice. It justifies escalation of violence. Plus, for Callis personally, taking this beating is what old-school managers did. Bobby Heenan took bumps. Jimmy Hart took bumps. Paul Bearer took bumps. Great managers were willing to put themselves in harm's way to get heat for their clients. Callis doing this shows he's willing to commit to the bit. He's willing to suffer for the story. That's respectable from a professional standpoint, even if we hate his character. So while we're all celebrating Moxley getting revenge, Callis might be lying there thinking, perfect, that's exactly what I wanted to happen. Because now the story gets more interesting, not less. Do you think Don Callis is happy or upset about this attack from a career standpoint? Interesting question. Let's talk about what this means for Moxley's character going forward. Because now that he's gotten his revenge on Callis, what's next for him? Does he shift his focus to the Don Callis family members? Does he start going after Kenny Omega or Will Ospreay? Does this become a full faction war? Or does Moxley move on to something else entirely? Does he refocus on championship pursuits? Does he find a new enemy to obsess over? The beauty of Moxley's character is that he can pivot in multiple directions. He's not locked into being just one thing. He can be the unhinged warrior in one storyline and the championship contender in another. But whatever direction they go, AEW needs to keep Moxley relevant and intense. They can't let him cool off after this big moment. They need to maintain his momentum and keep him in prominent positions. Moxley is one of AEW's biggest stars and one of their best performers. Everything he does should feel important. Every segment should matter. Every match should be significant. The Callis beatdown was a peak moment for his character. Now AEW needs to build toward the next peak rather than letting him drift aimlessly. What should be Jon Moxley's next major feud after this? Who should he go after? Here's my prediction for what happens next, and you can absolutely call me out if I'm wrong. Don Callis will be injured and off TV for a few weeks. This sells the severity of the attack and gives the story room to breathe. Meanwhile, the Don Callis family will cut scathing promos about Moxley and promise revenge. When Callis returns, he'll be even more vicious. He'll be out for blood. He'll orchestrate attacks on Moxley that are even more brutal than what he suffered. This becomes a war of escalation. Eventually, this builds to a major match at a PPV. Maybe it's Moxley versus Kenny Omega in a grudge match. Maybe it's a multi-man War Games style match. But it's going to be violent and it's going to deliver. The feud will probably last through at least one or two more PPV cycles. This isn't a one-and-done story, this is something AEW can mine for months of content. And ultimately, Moxley will come out on top. Because he's the babyface, sort of, in this story. He's the one we're supposed to root for. His final victory over the Don Callis family will be satisfying. But along the way, we're going to get some incredible matches and segments. This is going to be appointment television for AEW fans. Do you agree with my prediction, or do you think something completely different will happen? Share your thoughts. Let me give you my final take on this entire situation, and then I need to hear from you in the comments. The Jon Moxley destruction of Don Callis is exactly the kind of moment that makes wrestling exciting. It's payoff after months of build-up. It's justice being served in brutal fashion. It's the kind of segment that reminds us why we love this crazy business. Was it violent? Yes. Was it uncomfortable at times? Probably. But was it effective storytelling? Absolutely. Wrestling needs these moments. We need the payoffs where the villain gets what's coming to them. We need the cathartic release of seeing the bad guy punished. Without that, storylines feel incomplete and unsatisfying. AEW deserves credit for committing to this story and delivering on the promise. They could have chickened out. They could have given us a watered-down version. But instead, they gave us exactly what we wanted: Moxley unleashing hell on Callis. Now they need to follow through. This can't be the end of the story, it needs to be the beginning of the next chapter. Give us the revenge from the Don Callis family. Give us the escalation. Give us the war. Don Callis deserves credit too for being willing to take this beating, for being willing to suffer for the story. That's old school mentality in the best way possible. And Moxley continues to prove why he's one of the most compelling performers in all of wrestling. He commits to his character 100%. He delivers in these big moments. He makes everything feel real. So here's what I need from you in the comments. On a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with Moxley finally getting his hands on Callis? What's the next move for both men? Where does this story go from here? Did this moment make you want to watch more AEW, or are you already a regular viewer? What's the most brutal moment you've ever seen involving a manager in wrestling? And finally, who would you like to see Moxley feud with next after this Don Callis situation is resolved? Smash that like button if you've been waiting months for Moxley to destroy Callis. Subscribe to Wrestling Newsletter because we're covering every development in AEW and wrestling as a whole. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any breaking news. And share this video with every wrestling fan you know because moments like this are what make wrestling special. This is the kind of content that reminds us why we fell in love with this business in the first place. Jon Moxley finally got his hands on Don Callis. The invisible hand has been made visible through violence. And the wrestling world is better for it. Now let's see where this incredible story goes next.